1, 2, 3,
4, 5, 6,
7, 8, 9. Hey, we're close. How's it going, man?
Oh, I'm supposed to start.
You were supposed to start. My bad. Go ahead.
This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 41, where we're going to talk about our favorite Azure resources, recorded live July 30th, 2014. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Windows Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, Exchange, Lync, and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Chris Johnson.
And I'm Andrew Call.
And we're just two dudes telling you how we see it. So how are things going, AC?
Man. It's an okay day. I'm in pain.
You're in pain?
And I've been dealing with a shoulder problem lately, and so I finally go to the doctor yesterday after going through physical therapy and icing every few hours and stuff. And he finally decides that I have bursitis. I need to get a shot in my arm. And he had a PA, physician's assistant, who was kind of like a teaching doctor.
Oh, yeah?
Sorry, he was teaching her. And so he's teaching her, and she's getting the syringe all ready and stuff. And it's taking a needle and going through your back of your shoulder and going right into the middle of your shoulder.
You had me at needle.
Yeah, and it was like, I'm going in, and I'm like, oh my God, this hurts, and this hurts, and I don't know. It's just been, it's painful.
Oh, dude.
So my shoulders, yeah, it's not moving very well, but it's going to get better. It's just very painful from the shot. So.
Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's all good, though. I'm just same old, same old.
Yeah, nice.
How about you?
I'm back from a bit of travel. I was obviously off at WPC a couple of weeks ago, which was in Washington, D.C., and that was a great trip. That was a fun conference, and it was my first time in D.C., so I got to see a bunch of the sites as well. Went for a walk around and Lincoln Memorial and all that. And then went out to the Air and Space Museum, so got to go visit Space Shuttle Discovery and have a few quiet, private, intimate moments with some hardware. It was great.
Very cool.
Really fun.
Yeah, that's a fun. That hangar out at Dulles is nuts.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then so that was a couple of weeks ago. Then last week I was off in New Zealand for the New Zealand SharePoint conference. I went and did part of the keynote down there, and then also did a session as well. And that was fun, obviously getting back to New Zealand, seeing my family as well, which was nice. But yeah, so I'm all travelled out. I'm back at home this week, which is nice.
That's good.
Oh,
Welcome
and then
back.
I found out somebody on Reddit wants to punch me in the face. So
do tell.
We'll send a link off to the show notes. But there's somebody that submitted a link on Reddit titled "Whoever invented sandbox solutions should be punched in the face." And for those who don't know, sandbox solutions, I think we've talked about them on the show before.
Yeah.
But they're a feature in SharePoint that let you write some code and then upload it into SharePoint and have it run. And it was built, I think it was first done in SharePoint 2010, right? That was when they first came out. And I worked back on the SharePoint engineering team for a while and looked after that feature and worked on it for a couple of years, I think. And so, yeah, I came across this link on Reddit and I thought it was really hilarious. And so I responded.
What'd you say?
Oh, I sort of, I actually, there was a couple of people that knew I'd worked on it that had already replied that were saying, hey, man, no, you can't go punch him in the face. But then I did reply to the guy and said, look, it sounds like your environment's a little bit hosed. He was having problems with uploading new versions of his solution and things. And so I just gave him a little bit of advice on resetting stuff.
Gotcha. Resetting, that's how we do with SharePoint, right?
Yeah, I did actually want to reply, have you rebooted? But I thought that might get me 2 punches in the face.
You might get a jab and a right cross or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was pretty hilarious.
Oh, that's funny, man.
Yeah. Hey, so anyway, this episode 41, I can't believe we've done over 40 episodes. This is crazy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I remember when we start last October, November, so we're getting close to being, hitting the 1 year mark. That's pretty cool.
That's pretty amazing. We're gonna have to have a blowout party for our first year anniversary.
we got to do something.
Yeah. Hey, so in this episode, we are going to talk about our favorite cloud/Azure resources. Right. So what we thought we'd do is summarize, as best we can to go through some of the interesting resources, links, blogs, tools, articles, training resources, and those sorts of things that we used sort of almost daily in many regards, or at least weekly, when we're building out stuff for Azure. And so, it's funny because I looked through your list in our note as we're preparing for the episode, and I was like, yep, use that, use that, use that. So there's a good portion of overlap, but I think we've got a whole lot of really interesting resources that people might be interested in. So first thing to note is we'll take this whole list of links and pop it in the show notes or up on the site for people. So you don't need to remember these or jot down the URLs or anything like that. We'll link off to them. So why don't we get started? Why don't we start with a couple of, given this is a podcast, I see here that you listen to a couple of podcasts. Why don't you kick things off and tell people about some podcasts you listen to?
Yeah, there's two of them that I pay attention to. One of them is called the Azure Podcast. That's azpodcast.com. And it's by three guys that work for Microsoft. They're all on the engineering or support side or MCS side. And what they essentially do is they pick a different feature of of Azure, and they talk about that one feature for 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour or so. Sometimes when there's a conference, they'll do an update show similar to how we do. So they've done one for WPC. They did a couple of them for Build, for Tech Ed. But they focus primarily on just look at a feature, explore that feature. That's an episode, move on to the next one. And Azure gives them a really good stock of stuff to go take a look at. So it's a very low-key podcast. I wish they did a little more small business stuff and more startup stuff. All the stuff they talk about is focused primarily towards the enterprise. So that was some feedback they gave them recently, and they read it on the air and they recognized it. But I mean, one guy supports IaaS, and then the other two do enterprise solutions. So it's not terribly surprising.
Gotcha.
It's a good one. And then the other one that I listen to that's pretty good, /watch. It's a video podcast that Scott Hanselman runs called Azure Fridays. Link for that one's just a little too long to say out, so we'll just go to the show notes to grab that. But that's just a series of, generally they're less than 20 minutes. Sometimes they're less than 10 minutes, where Scott Hanselman stands there with somebody else and shows off something, screen share a little bit of video, and just shows something off with Azure. So it's pretty
yeah, it's nice and digestible, that one, right? It's not particularly long, and it's kind of it's very easy to watch and apply.
Yep. I got that one on my iPad. I watch that frequently. So
nice. So what about that's it actually brings us to an interesting thing we should talk about is people involved in Azure that you follow. Like Scott Hanselman is obviously big in the Microsoft developer world and in the web world and things, and he does a bunch with Azure as well. What about some other folks that you follow through, say, blogs or things like that? Either people that work at Microsoft or outside.
So there's I have three that work. They all work at Microsoft. Aside from you got the, I guess we'll do general like product or group blogs. We'll do that in a minute. But individual people, Scot Guthrie, obviously he's been Mr. Cloud, and now he really is Mr. Cloud
the guru
for Microsoft. Yeah. So that's weblogs.asp.net Scott Gu. Yeah. Another one that's really big that I really like his stuff is Clemens Vasters. So that's blogs.msdn.com/b/ClemensV. He's also heavily involved with Azure. Really good content. Does a good job, really good job with his blog and kind of getting an update on his voice on what's coming. And then another one that is very low level, very technical, mostly around the identity side and the Azure Active Directory side, is, and I'm going to mispronounce his last name, but Vitorio Bertocci, I think.
Yep.
So blogs.msdn.com/vbertocci, Bertocci. He's primarily from the identity space. He was involved in Windows Identity Foundation, ADFS, Azure, Active Directory, all that kind of stuff. So he's really good on the identity side. So he generally his is one of the blogs I usually don't do a Control A mark all as read. I'm usually going through those individually. So
yeah, Vitorio. I don't know if you've ever seen him present at a conference. He's great to watch present at a conference as well. I think he basically hand draws his slides, using a tablet and an e-ink, right? So he sort of, or not e-ink, you know what I mean, right? With a pen on, say, a Surface or something like that. And he's just he's a great presenter and really engaging and entertaining to watch as well.
Yeah, you can't miss him. He's very long, black, curly hair.
Yeah, very long. He's a great
How about
guy.
you?
I got a couple of others I'd add to that. Two in the SharePoint Azure realm. The first is Steve Peschka, who's a longtime SharePoint sort of elite technical dude, for want of a better word, right? Steve's a great guy. I've worked with him for years. He blogs up on blogs.technet.com, /Peschka. We'll link off to it. Not expecting you to note get his spelling of his last name right. I get it wrong every time. But he blogs a lot about SharePoint, as well as blogging a lot about things like identity and Azure AD and Identity Federation and things like that is kind of in the SharePoint and Azure realm. So there's a bunch of interesting things there for folks that are that way inclined. Also, another guy that's also close to the SharePoint realm is Kirk Evans. So we've interviewed Kirk on the show before. Again, really nice guy. He's blogging a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. He's not blogging as much as we'd like him to, but his blogs are quite often about Azure and SharePoint and very development focused too. So for those people writing code, he has a lot of interesting stuff about writing code for Azure and for SharePoint, and topics that sort of span both of those realms. And then the final one I would add here is Michael Washam's blog. So Steve and Kirk both work for Microsoft. That's I should note that. Michael used to work at Microsoft, but now he's struck out on his own with a partner. And I believe he was the guy that wrote many of the PowerShell commandlets for Azure that are published up on GitHub. So he's very what's the right word? Active in the Azure and PowerShell realm. And also in the past, he's been involved with SharePoint as well. So, for example, he's done a whole bunch of PowerShell around automating SharePoint build-outs in Azure and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
so,
great resource.
He doesn't blog very often, but he's a very knowledgeable guy in this sort of area and very useful information. So he's another one worth following.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple like general blogs too that I just mentioned as well as obviously the Windows Azure blog. That's blogs.msdn.com/b/Windows Azure, which I don't know if the URL is going to change to Microsoft Azure, but at any case, it's the team blog. And then I'm a firm believer of always looking at what the other guys are doing, and so I follow two Amazon Web Service blogs. One of them is just the general Amazon Web Service blog, the AWS blog. That's aws.amazon.com/blogs/AWS. But there's another one too that's pretty relevant. It's the AWS Developer Blog for .NET. They have these for all these different platforms, like for Java, for PHP, and all that stuff. That one's at blogs.aws.amazon.com/.net. And it's topics around for the .NET developer and working with AWS and like talking about some of the PowerShell commandlets that they have and stuff like that. So those are two other good resources looking at the competition to see what's going on.
Very cool. Yep, no, those look good. Hey, so moving along a little bit from blogs and people, what about more around like training and like articles and sort of learning resources? What are a couple that you're following?
So I think that I'll put this in the same category, the not just learning, but also asking questions. Where do you go to get questions and stuff?
Yeah.
For me, Stack Overflow is the best place. I know MSDN's got groups and stuff, but I find those to be very hard to navigate, and you have to go find what bucket your stuff belongs in. So stackoverflow.com/question/tagged/Azure is where I go to ask those questions and search for them. It's also great samples and stuff to learn about what Microsoft is doing and how to work with Azure at the GitHub Azure account. So github.com/Azure. But I will point out there are two articles, or I guess collections of articles. One of them's by the Patterns and Practice group that are absolutely phenomenal. So the first one is Building Real-World Cloud Apps. And the URL for this is tremendously long, but it's from a series that Scot Guthrie did. And I don't know if he did the whole thing or if he just got it started and then someone else, kind of flushed out a lot of the stuff, a lot of the content. But it's really good on just some real world stuff that you need to keep in mind. But the other one that I found to be, and I'm still going through this, I wouldn't say I'm going through every single little bit of it, but just to make sure I know everything's there. It's called the Cloud Design Patterns. It's by the Patterns and Practice group. Are you familiar with the book it's called Design Patterns by the Gang of Four?
No.
Okay, yeah. There's a book that you go to Amazon, do a search for design patterns, and it's referred to as the GOF, the Gang of Four, and it's 4 people, and I always forget who it is, but it's one of the software developers' Bibles, like complete code. Martin Fowler's refactoring, design patterns. It's one of those things. Like I have it in hardback. It's that kind of a book.
Gotcha.
This to me is very much like the general design patterns book, but for the cloud. And so it goes through. It's on MSDN. It's got one of those cryptic MSDN links. So you have to go to the show notes to grab this one. But you can grab it as a PDF, or you can grab it in EPUB format if you want to put it on your e-reader. But there are 24 different patterns that they go over and 10 guidance topics. And so when I talk about, when they say guidance patterns, a guidance pattern is kind of like, when should you be using caching and what kinds of caching should you be using?
Gotcha.
How should you be doing transactions and competing consumers and all that kind of stuff? And then around the guidance side, it's things like auto-scaling guidance and asynchronous messaging and data consistency and partitioning. Things that building for a tightly coupled on-prem system is different than building in a very loosely coupled cloud, massive scale way of doing it. And so having something like this is I think a fantastic resource for people to have. I'm a big fan of those.
Yeah, there's often times where I'll be looking at building something out, right? And you're like, am I architecting this right? Like, how else are other people kind of doing this pattern? Surely there's a best practices or sort of well thought out pattern behind, common problems, right? And so it's nice to be able to refer and see if you're doing it right.
Yeah, it's real world stuff because you and I are, we're working on a startup, the Kerrb that we've talked about on the show before, and we've had some challenges in it where we've got schedules and then we have agents that are doing work for us, and there is a little bit of a delay on when you talk to Azure and when you get the response back and operations that we're trying to automate for people. And, we need to find a way of, we don't want to have this single threaded model. How do we best go through and have, a pool of agents that go do all the work that need to get done, but it doesn't hold up the rest of the system, and you just have this job thing that's working. So I actually have gone through there a couple times on some challenges I've run into with our startup to see, is what we're doing, does that fit one of these patterns, or one of these patterns fit what we're trying to do? And I've changed what we're doing to actually fit the pattern, just to make it more performant, just to be a little more reliable.
Oh, that's cool. No, it's great to have those reference sort of architectures, so to speak.
Yeah. How about you for training stuff or learning stuff? Where do you go for stuff?
There's a couple of things I would bring up. First is Pluralsight. So if you're a developer and you haven't discovered Pluralsight, you're either living under a rock or you need to be hit with a stick. It is the single best source of online developer training that I've come across in my time in recent memory. And I say, you go up to pluralsight.com, you can go take a look at all of the library of training and stuff, but there is some really interesting and good Azure training up there. One in particular that I thought was really interesting, and actually Scott Hanselman interviewed this guy, Vishwas Lele, I think is the way you pronounce his name.
Yep.
He did a course on Pluralsight called Applied Windows Azure. And you should go listen to the blog that Hanselman did with him. But it's really interesting because it's sort of more of a, hey, look, like here's what I've learned from projects and how I've applied different Azure principles and practices and how to achieve different, real world outcomes, right? So he talks about loosely coupling apps like you spoke about, in the different architectures and so forth. Talks about, dealing with worker roles and jobs between things and stuff like that. Dealing with HIPAA, stuff like really applied lessons learned almost. And talks a bunch about big compute and big data and things like that, which I thought was really interesting. So go listen to his podcast with Hanselman up on Hansel Minutes, which is the name of the podcast.
Yeah, it's episode 430. Yeah.
Oh, episode 430. Excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, I watched that and, listened to that while I was at the gym one day, and then went and checked out his course on Pluralsight. That's a really good one. If you haven't done Pluralsight stuff and you're interested in getting into Azure, that's a good one to start with, I think. Just because it's not like ultra technical, like real ones and zeros stuff, but it's very practical and applied.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree.
Having said that, there's a whole bunch of Azure training up on Pluralsight. So we'll put a link in the show notes to the search. It'll give you a list of the things back. But there's a bunch of authors, bunch of courses up on Pluralsight that are great starting points. Whether you're expert coder or just a newbie beginning, that's a really good place to start.
Yeah,
we should also mention that that's a paid service, right? So I think you can get a trial, but then you pay a subscription to get access to the training.
Yeah, but the subscription, we're talking $30 a month for unlimited access to all the training. So it's a...
Go bug your boss to go get your Pluralsight subscription, right? Like if you don't already have one, it's definitely kind of like an excellent arrow to have in your quiver.
Yeah, then you should go over to the author named Andrew Connell on Pluralsight and watch all his courses multiple times. That's just...
Yeah. Optional. So another one that I would say is, we put a 5-part PowerShell course up on an Azure PowerShell email-based course up on Kerrb.com, right? So our little startup that we're doing. And that one's a good one. It's very much just getting started with Azure and PowerShell. So it walks through some of the real basics that you can do. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of an interesting thing for folks just starting out that want to do some interesting stuff with PowerShell and controlling things in Azure. So that comes to, you go sign up for the mailing list up on the site, and then we'll send you daily. We'll send you a new part of that course in 5 parts.
Yeah, and to be clear too, that course, it's not just, it's all about PowerShell. We show you how to. It's primarily about working with Windows Azure and working with IaaS. And creating VMs, but we show you how to do it through the Azure Management Portal, through the web interface, and then we're like, oh yeah, and here's how you do it through PowerShell if you want to do command line. So you can see both options to it.
Yeah. So that's a good one to get started with.
Very cool.
I've got a couple of tools. Yeah, tools. There you go. Great minds think alike.
There you go.
There's two I would recommend looking at. The first is a basic, sort of a more of a basic tool, which is called CloudXplorer, which is up on it's from Clumsy Leaf Software, and this is a tool I've used for quite a while, and it's a really basic tool for interacting with blob storage and so forth in Azure. We use it on the show to upload different bits and pieces to Azure Blob Storage, or at least I do, when I'm uploading XML for the feeds and all that sort of stuff to our show website. It's kind of been a go-to tool for dealing with blob storage for quite some time. It could deal with, multiple uploads and streaming uploads up into blob storage, all that sort of stuff. And once it's up there, dealing with, all the configuration options on blobs and so forth. The other one I would say is much more of a developer-centric or much more sophisticated and complex monitoring tool. It's from New Relic. So if you're not familiar with New Relic, New Relic's tools, newrelic.com, and they do it's not just it's not specific to just Azure, but it's really for the folks building stuff in .NET and so forth. It's a great tool for being able to like real-time monitoring of your applications once they're up in the cloud. Right. In fact, it's not even once they're up in the cloud, right? It's monitoring your apps. But it's really handy if you're up in Azure, right? So being able to do see what's going on in your application, load times, page load times, all of that sort of stuff once it's running, and getting that really deep insight into your applications around performance of your apps and stuff. Because, one thing people complain about a lot is, you upload the app and then that's it. You don't really have that much visibility into how things are going. You can't sort of right-click and go process monitor and see how much CPU or see what's going on your machine. And so that's really important to bake in insights and monitoring and tracking of your app right from the early stages. And so New Relic is one that I've heard a lot of people have great success with.
Kind of going back to the first one that you mentioned, the Cloud Explorer. I believe I wasn't even actually familiar with that when you put that in our show notes. There's a different one that I use just to throw it out there to people. I don't know which one's better. I found this one a long time ago and I've been using it. It's called the Cloudberry Explorer. It's by Cloudberry Labs.
Oh yeah, I used to use that. Yeah.
So I use that. I use the Pro version of that. It's like $40 and it allows me to connect to my Azure storage accounts and interface with uploading files and stuff like that. That's how I go through and I manage all my storage blobs. The main reason I got that one is because I originally was using S3 blobs and on AWS, and they have a Cloudberry Explorer for Amazon S3, and the interface to them is identical. So I have both copies of it, one for S3 and one for Azure. You said that you used to use this one, but you used the other one. You used the
Cloud Explorer?
Yeah, Cloud Explorer. What was the reason you switched over?
I used the Cloudberry, I think that's what it's called, right? Cloudberry?
Yeah.
That's when I was doing some work with AWS and used it for S3. I didn't use it for Azure.
Gotcha.
And okay. I think it was before they'd done the Azure version.
Gotcha.
And so I needed a separate tool for Azure at the time. That's when I started using Cloud Explorer. And then, so I used them for two slightly different purposes.
Gotcha. Yeah, now
cool.
I'm trying to find this an equivalent product to it that allows me to do the same thing. Allows me to do the exact same thing, but doing it from OS X now.
Ah, right, gotcha.
So it's not. I just don't have it nearly as much. So they don't have as much of a Explorers for Amazon or for Azure. So
gotcha.
Oh well.
Cool. So anything else you want to cover off before we wrap up here?
I don't think so. We covered quite a few links though. Yeah, that's a lot of main stuff I look at. So it's you just gotta then just pay attention. It just stuff comes out of these conferences and especially Build. I follow what comes out of Build quite a bit, and I look at the Azure tag for all those sessions and go start pulling those things across, pull those things out and watch them. So
probably the final comment I'd make is the way we track these things. So I use Feedly for monitoring blogs. I have pre-canned Twitter searches set up for watching particular hashtags. That's a really good way of following news for particular events or particular technologies. And then obviously following people on Twitter and watching the news come out that way. To kind of wrap up these things.
Very
great.
Cool.
So we've covered some podcasts. We've covered some information about blogs people should follow, training articles, tools, and a little bit about things like where people can go to get more information about starting out with these things. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, we'll wrap this up in show notes. We'll put all of these links up on the blog or on the post that goes along with this podcast. So I encourage everybody to go take a look. If you've got questions, obviously send them in. We'd love to hear from our listeners. We know you're out there, so don't be shy. Send us a question. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or MP3 and provide a link so we can play your question on the show. You can subscribe to us on iTunes by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS. at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find a full transcript and show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook, searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.